The fire department is governed by the 29 Palms Water District, but by law, water revenues such as your water charges, the ready to serve, and the water availability assessment that is found on property tax bills cannot be used to support fire department operations. In addition, this particular fire department, the 29 Palms Fire Department, does not receive any portion of the 1% general property tax. In a lot of other communities, a portion of that 1% general property tax goes to fire department operations. In addition, because this fire department is not part of a county or a city, we do not receive any portion of sales tax revenue, nor do we receive any portion of the transit occupancy tax that is charged to guests that stay at hotels. Therefore, we are in a very small box as far as the type of funding that we can utilize, and it comes down to being a voter-approved special tax. The tax history of the fire department, and even going before 1985, the Water District has been governing the fire department since it was formed in 1958. And up through those early years, up to 1985, the Water District was funding fire department operations on a very limited scale out of water revenues. And obviously, by law, that was something that could not be done come the early 1980s. In 1985, the first, what was known as a benefit assessment, was put in place by the district. And that dollar amount per household in 1985 was $33.85. The method of increasing the benefit assessment was a process where the district gave notice each year as to what they were going to set the amount at. That notice went out to property owners, and if less than a certain percentage of protest was received back from the property owners, the board could then proceed to impose that amount. And so over those years between 1985 up through 1986, we saw that $33.85 increase up to an amount of $57 for the years 1994 through 1996. Statewide Proposition 218 that was passed by the voters of the entire state of California put us into an even smaller box and forced us to go out to the voters for a special tax measure. That was done in 1997. In essence, the old benefit assessment method was the way we were doing it. We were outlawed by a new state law under Prop 218 of doing it. So went to the voters in 1997 with a special tax measure at a $54 per unit rate. We actually lowered the rate by $3 when we went out for the special tax approval. That measure had no inflation adjuster in it. It was estimated to be adequate for 5 years, and at that time we were staffing only one fire station. That $54 per unit with no inflation adjuster stayed at that same dollar amount for 8 years. The next tax increase was approved by the voters in March of 2005, and it was increased to $80 per unit. Going back to Measure O, it talks about that over those 8 years, it was staffing at one fire station. In fact, for 2 of those last years, we were actually staffing both fire stations off at $54. But one of the effects it caused, we were cutting deeply into our fund balance, and that's something that will be addressed further on. Measure J was passed in March 2005 at the $80 per unit. Once again, it was a measure that had no inflation adjuster. And one thing that was very specific in the ballot language of that measure, we said that that measure at $80 a unit would be good for an estimated 8 years of staffing 2 fire stations. So if you take March 2005 and add an estimated 8 years, we get into early 2013, and we are hitting the end of that estimated 8 years. That has brought us to this point where staff and the district has worked on the proposed Ordinance 94. One thing to make clear, this measure is going to go out to the voters if approved by the board, would go out to the voters in the spring of 2012, but the effective date of the increase will not be until July 1st, 2013. It is a 50% special tax increase from the $80 a unit to $120 a unit. It also proposes a 4% annual inflation adjuster for 10 years. With this, we're going to be able to continue staffing both fire stations. And in addition, because what we're seeing in the way of call volume increase, we are looking to add a 2-person patrol approximately halfway through those 10 years at the downtown station. And that 2-person patrol would also be able to cross-staff the aerial that the fire department now has. This measure does not change this fire department from a combination Department of Career and Volunteer to all career or anything of that nature. It's going to still be a combination of career personnel and the majority being still volunteer staff. But it does provide long-term sustainability to maintain the operations that are needed to protect the community. One of the effects of a flat tax, and when the tax was passed in 2005 and we told the voters that that $80 per unit was going to be good for an estimated 8 years, we knew going into that what we were going to have to do with our fund balance was in the early years we were going to have to be putting money away into essence what we call savings or our fund balance. And then in the latter years we were going to start taking money out of that fund balance, or another term that's commonly used is our annual spending. We are now in deficit spending. We are spending more in a year than what we are bringing in current year tax revenues. The danger that we face and the importance of why we must increase from $80 to $120, and the reason to try to avoid this bell curve effect that we have faced in previous years, and the reason for the 4% annual inflation adjuster, if you look all the way out to 2013, at the end of the fiscal year 2013, our fund balance for operating funds is going to be down to approximately $450,000. We can't go below that. We need approximately 40% of the next year's fiscal operating expenditures sitting in the bank when we start the fiscal year, because we see no revenue from that tax until December 1st. And that is why fund balance is so critical for the start of each fiscal year. In essence, if we don't have a tax increase, what we're going to have to do is get expenditures down to a level that we have a balanced budget again, and we're actually putting a little more back in the fund balance. And to get to that state, it's going to result in a drastic reduction in the current service level. And when we talk drastic reduction in the current service level, we are foreseeing probably a fire station completely closed and the other fire station being staffed at such a level that it's not, in my mind, an adequate crew to even respond out of a single station. That type of reduction in service level is going to lead to inadequate response times to emergency calls. And we also have the potential for increased insurance rates to homeowners, and those are the first ones that are going to see it. And there's going to be a carry-on effect in the next couple of years that commercial properties will also see that. Checking with one of the local insurance agencies, currently the district, if any property that is within 5 miles of a fire station and within 1,000 feet of a fire hydrant, it's rated as a Class 4 property. If we have a drastic reduction in service, we have the potential to go from a Class 4 to a Class 9 fire department. And these are the type of increases that would be seen by homeowners and commercial property owners in their insurance rates. Anywhere from 11% up to as much as 31%. The final public hearing on the proposed ordinance will be held at the regular rescheduled Water District meeting of Wednesday, December 21st at 6 p.m. at the Water District headquarters at 72401 Hatch Road. The process that we face in putting this forth and possibly getting it approved is that This ordinance must first be approved by the Board of Directors of the Water District. If the ordinance is approved, that would cause it to be placed on a special mail ballot measure with a date of April 17th. And with a special mail ballot type election, the ballots are actually mailed out approximately 4 weeks in advance and then are due back to the registrar of voters by the April 17th date. For this measure to pass, it would require 2/3 approval. And once again, if the ordinance receives 2/3 voter approval, it would become effective on July 1st, 2013.